So, Brexit continues to stumble on like a man who's dying, and everyone knows that the man's about to die, just no one really likes him. So everyone's quite content to let him stumble around until he eventually either bleeds to death or just walks out of the pub. But a good column here from The Guardian today, well, not today, last week. The northeast of England will pay the price for decades of dishonesty about Nissan. Thatcher's ministers knew the EU membership was vital in attracting the Japanese car maker, and no one told the public. The sprawling site near Sunderland of the giant Japanese car manufacturer Nissan is a fine-tuned product of Britain's participation in the European Union. The company's decision to pull the making of the proposed new X-Trail model out of that plant is a disastrous consequence of the failure to explain this to the British people. So, that is huge. That generally means that plant's days are numbered. When a manufacturer tends to pull, especially the car manufacturer, tends to pull a car from being made at a plant, that is very often the sign that plant's about to close. Especially if you look back at history. That is generally the sign of a plant that's about to close. And that takes with it, I think it's about 5,000 jobs, something like that. It's a massive plant. So the virtual absence of public explanation about the benefits of EU membership was exploited in the 2016 referendum by the Leave campaign, and it enabled its proponents to dismiss well-informed warnings then and now as scaremongering. Even on Sunday, when Nissan itself explained that Brexit uncertainty was a factor in its decision to build the new SUV in Japan, airtime was still given to Brexit campaigners denying this. Prominent among them was probably Jacob Rees-Mogg, a backbench Conservative MP with no discernible car industry expertise or experience, whose Somerset constituency could hardly be further away from the northeast. The alarm has been sounded before, and since the referendum by Labour MPs in Sunderland, whose constituents work at the plant, and that has grown to employ almost 8,000 people and 30,000 more in the supply chain. So if that plant goes, that is a ton of jobs. A ton of jobs to lose. And yet Brexiteers don't care. And yet you have a lot of people in that Nissan factory who voted to leave, thinking that they would be fine and that they somehow weren't affected. Well, as karma, as they say, always comes back to bite you in the ass. Sarah Hodkinson, the MP for Washington and Sunderland West, remembers the rush of optimism when Nissan arrived in the 80s, bringing hope to a region of closed mines and stalled shipbuilding. She is still trying to inform her Leave voting constituencies about why Brexit chucks a spanner in the works. Bridget Phillipson, the MP for the neighbouring Houghton and Sunderland South, has argued that it is a dereliction of duty for Labour to acquiesce to the Brexit, knowing the economic damage it entails. After the weekend's dire news from Nissan, she called again for a people's vote with an option to stay in the EU. Phillipson has lamented the gaps in public knowledge about the advantages conferred by EU membership, among with Remainers as well as Leavers. But this is a blind spot with a long history. In fact, a prime example of failure to inform the public and instead mislead it with propaganda was a speech made by Margaret Thatcher as she opened the Nissan plant in 1986. We have said this on this channel multiple times. As soon as the referendum really kicked off, Remain was already in a bad position. we had to fight 40 years of anti-EU propaganda. And as we've often said on this, we have also, this is what they're going to get to the Margaret Thatcher example, of nationalising success but Europeanising failure. So anytime this country has a success and the European Union has been involved, in any press release or anything like that, the European Union is not mentioned once. But if it failed, if that project failed and the European Union was involved, then, oh, it's Europe's fault. That's why it was the European Union. Oh, what a waste of money. It had nothing to do with the government. We weren't involved. It was the European Union. And that is a prime example of what we have been fighting against, even now. And I guarantee you, post-Brexit, when we leave, the idiots are going to blame the EU when we are not even in the EU anymore. So Thatcher had lobbied the Japanese government and industry since the 70s to set up in Britain. Attracting their investment became a crucial component of her vision for Britain's future. As she closed the old heavy industries down, Britain's membership of the ECC was central to her sales pitch to the Japanese. The UK was presented as a convenient and agreeable base for the company's European operations. Nissan saw the business case for that, and as have 1,000 other Japanese companies and other car makers now using the UK as their European base. How long do you think it's going to take for all these companies to leave? Remember, it's just come out that Japan has now decided it's no longer going to negotiate with Britain until after Brexit is completed. And they have said, we are going to literally, they've basically said their comments have summed up to, we're going to basically bend you over the barrel and take you for everything we can get. You know, and we are going to be put in that position. We are going to have to make absolute desperate trade deals with ramifications that are going to absolutely screw over this country for decades to come. And one of the big problems people don't understand is you can't vote to leave a trade agreement. Once a trade agreement is signed, it's very hard to get out of. You can't just walk away from it. So, you know, again, and the only way we could get out of it is actually by rejoining the EU. But there you go. So Nissan chose the northeast principally for its ports, given easy access to and from the European mainland. So Thatcher was fully aware that the ECC membership was crucial to its decision to locate in Britain. In 1980, Keith Joseph, then a trade minister, wrote to her, "The deal is tangible evidence of the benefits to the UK of the membership of the European community. Nissan has chosen the United Kingdom because it gives them access to the whole European market. If it were outside the community, it is very unlikely that Nissan would have given the United Kingdom serious consideration as a base for this substantial investment." You will search in vain for a single word in the then Prime Minister's speech that acknowledges that truth. However, she concealed the facts with a familiar comfort blanket that Britain's supposed superiority to its European neighbours, which still echoes through the Brexit debate 3 decades on. Nissan's decision, she said, was confirmation that within the whole of Europe, the United Kingdom was the most attractive country, politically and economically, for large-scale investment. We can only speculate about how much embedded public knowledge of the EU's benefits would be today if she and other leading politicians had explained, rather than obfuscated, if the basics had been taught in schools and reported honestly in the media, Attitudes might be very different if the EU flag had flown outside the Washington factory and other sites of regeneration that owed their existence to and owed success to Britain's membership and the substantial EU grants and loans over the years. Instead, the public has remained largely uninformed about the economic advantages of the EU and its frictionless single market, for which Thatcher herself pushed so hard. And you may also remember that there is a lot of, especially a lot of these Brexiteers claiming that Margaret Thatcher was not in favour of being in the EU and that she would want to leave the European Union. That's absolutely false. You've only got to look at the comments of Ken Clarke, who was in her cabinet at that time. There is no way Margaret Thatcher would ever dream of leaving the customs union or the single market. It just wouldn't be an option. She even said, again, this is Ken Clarke, that I'm trying to remember what he said now. Yeah, but he said that the political advantages of being in the European Union far outweighed any of its disadvantages. And that was Margaret Thatcher. So Theresa May has engaged in similar excessive public rhetoric since becoming the second Conservative female Prime Minister. In a speech made before the referendum in which she backed Remain, May said that the economic arguments are clear and a lot of people will invest here in the UK because the UK is in Europe. But since stepping over the fallen leadership candidates to become Prime Minister, May swerved into claiming Brexit is an economic opportunity. She made every effort not to push her own government's assessments of the economic damage Brexit would do, which found that the North East would be the worst hit region, with a 16% reduction in GDP in the event of a no deal, which again a lot of these Brexiteers are pushing for in this area. How can you justify pushing for a no deal Brexit when you know this region is going to lose 16% of its GDP? That is massive. Massive. We are talking billions upon billions of pounds, jobs, investment, future jobs, gone, wiped out in a no deal. So, particularly due to the impact on Nissan, ever since publication, she has barely mentioned those assessments. She has ploughed on instead treating the 26 vote as sacred, to argue that the British public did not understand EU membership when faithfully asked to pronounce it on the referendum is not to dismiss people as stupid. It is to recognise a decades-long failure of education and honest information. From the moment major companies such as Nissan came to Britain up to the point when, with these warnings about Brexit were ignored, they began to withdraw. And that is the truth. It's not just Nissan. You were going to see loads of Japanese companies move over to the continent. We've already got, again, another news report I read recently, there's about 250 businesses that are already set to move to Amsterdam in the Netherlands. That's, and when all this damage happens, it's going to be fun watching, the chickens start to scream. It's going to be fun. Because, as I have said on this channel before, Brexiteers are uniquely responsible for what happens after we leave the European Union. We've already got strong inclinations from the fact that China's economy has started to slow down. That is signalling what a lot of economists have said for quite a while, that there is going to be a recession. That a recession is coming. We don't know when, but we can tell you it's coming. So 2019 could be the year that a recession hits. And if you couple that on top of Brexit, the UK is screwed. It is screwed hard. And the people who are responsible are the Brexiteers. And they are already trying to shift the blame. And I and myself and others will be going around reminding them of what they said about Brexit and about how it was all meant to be sunny uplands, and it would be outside the EU we would have economic opportunities hitherto undreamed of. The unicorns aren't coming. It is a donkey with a toilet roll stuck to its head. And that's what the Brexiteers are going to be claiming, that it's a unicorn. We're going to be in an emperor's clothes situation. Everyone's going to recognise the pit we have dug ourselves into. And the Brexiteers are going to be saying, oh, it's fine, because a few more, a few more metres down and we'll hit pay dirt. But the tunnel just keeps on getting longer and darker. And, we're screwed so badly. And it's all because of these Brexiteers.